what I'll do is I'll just ask Mark a couple of questions to get the ball rolling, then I'll open it up to you guys if anyone's got any questions or anything. So first of all, I'll probably ask the obvious one. How did the story come about?
Well, I'm originally from the west of Ireland, from a very small town called Ennis in County Clare, and I moved to Dublin to go to drama school when I was about 20, and I moved into the North Inner City, which at the time, that was around 1990 or something, and I had never seen heroin addicts before, and I moved. The North Inner City was quite strung out area of town in Dublin at the time, and I was completely and utterly fascinated with heroin addicts, because it appeared to me that Dublin was moving in two different time zones. There was everybody doing that, and then there was this sort of heroin slowed down, almost a dance going all around town, and I found it fascinating, and I always have been a great diarist, and I used to take down lots of things that I saw on the street, and the way that the heroin boys and the heroin girls would speak to each other, it reminded me of the way children spoke to each other. I saw two adult female heroin addicts on the street fighting over chalk ice one day, and one had her hand like that and the other had her hand over it, and they pulled the chalk ice one to the other, saying, "It's my fucking chalk ice now, it's my fucking chalk ice," and the chalk ice fell off the stick onto the ground, and I thought there was something incredibly funny and incredibly tragic in it at the same time, and I began to think of it almost in terms of vaudeville and Laurel and Hardy, and that kind of, that feeling of comedy on the edge of blackness in lots of ways. And I acted in the theatre for a long time, and then when I was about 30 I started writing plays, and I had a short play that was on, and Johnny Spears, who produced that, came to see one of the plays, and he asked me did I have anything by way of a storyline for a screenplay, and I had this idea of a film called Adam and Paul, about two boys, and you'd never find out which one was Adam and which one was Paul. It was between sunrise and sunset, and I knew that in the middle they'd meet a baby, but beyond that I didn't really know what was going to happen, and so I pitched that, and it was back in more innocent times, and he went, "That sounds fantastic," and I went, he introduced me to the director, Lenny Abrahamson, and then I went on a process of writing it, and me and Len talking about where we were going to go with it, and the stylistic references that we had, and that's basically where it came from.
Right. So, like you're saying, a lot of the story was kind of through your observations of the kind of homeless people that you've seen and the heroin addicts that you've seen. So, did you kind of do any research as well to get into the role?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a great method actor in any way, shape, or form. So I didn't take heroin for the part. I took heroin for fun. No, I didn't. So I didn't kind of go and live homeless to see what it was all like. But I did. I'm a very observational writer in that I write about what I see and what I encounter, and so there's things in that I did see every day in life. So it was a great sort of engagement with the people who were on the streets around where I lived. And then when the script was ready, me and Lenny started having contacts with this organisation called RAID, which are called Recovery Through Art, Drama and Education, and they're an organisation that try and be a drop-in centre for people who are current users or are currently on the streets and blah blah blah, and they come along and they do drama workshops and poetry workshops, and it's trying to get people into a dialogue, and sometimes then it's a way of them accessing health board programs, etc. And so we went and visited them quite a lot. On Wednesday mornings we used to go and do Tai Chi with them, which is, if anybody has ever done Tai Chi in a room full of people whacked out of it on heroin, very funny. And we then got them to read the script to us. We used them as actors, and then we got them to read the script and give us feedback on what they thought was real and what wasn't real, and we got really good feedback on it. I think I was telling you yesterday, there was one particular guy who, there was a scene at the start where there was these two young women who used to pass by Adam and Paul right at the start of the film, and it said they had a shopping trolley, and in it was a microwave oven, and they go, "How are you, Adam and Paul?" and then they break the shite laughing, and it was kind of a humiliating scene for Adam and Paul. So it was like right at the start. So we read it, and about 2 pages later the guy put up his hand and he goes, "Excuse me, why didn't they just steal the microwave?" So I went, I don't know, they just didn't steal it at this point. Maybe, you know, we'll continue on. We'll talk about it afterwards. And we continued on for another 5 pages. Then I was going, excuse me, they would have stolen that microwave. And I was like, yeah, of course, yeah, we'll definitely get to that. Yeah, we'll talk about that afterwards and blah, blah. This continued on for the whole reading, him going, the fucking microwave. And by the time he died, my character died at the end of the film, he put up his hand and he said, if they'd stolen the microwave, none of this would have happened. Which I thought was a particularly funny way of looking at a script. A script is a puzzle that if you solve it, you don't have to make it. But strangely enough, the film, the scene with the microwave did get ditched straight afterwards. I went home, I'm stupid, I'm a terrible writer. So we did that sort of engagement, and as a writer, I do believe that you shouldn't let the truth get in the way of a story in some sort of ways, and I would generally do research after I've written something rather than before I'd written something, because sometimes you just get stuck on detail rather than trying to imaginatively explore and then fix the detail afterwards. Probably a terrible thing to do.
So the film's kind of been lauded by people like Mike Leigh and Danny Boyle, have always put it in kind of their top 10 British films, and it's also kind of
it's not a British film, I'll have you
well,
know.
Irish, sorry.
800 years.
But, and it's also kind of known now for kind of changing Irish cinema, because maybe you could explain a bit about what it was like before cinema in Ireland.
Well, I think that before, we make up the narrative of what is the storytelling, what is the film history of our country. You know, any country does in hindsight, but up to a point, you know, at the early 2000s, I think there was a film culture in Ireland which made films that we wanted the rest of the world to like us in lots of ways. You know, we'll play the old petty old fucking agricultural dramas, I call them, or else we forever talking about nationalism and national ideals, and even when we talked about sexuality, it was sexuality as seen through the prism of nationalism and blah blah. And I was sick to death of watching nationalism on the television, and you know, sometimes the idea of nationalism is an excuse for not taking responsibility for yourself, and I thought there was a lot of that going on. So we kind of wanted to, you know, Lenny said, you know, at the start of the process, he said, we'll make a film about Dublin in which there'll be no pictures of the Halfpenny Bridge and no pictures of horses in it. So even though I did put a horse into it at one stage, and actually there's a big section with a horse in it in our second film that we did. But it was that idea of imagining the city differently, or seeing the city differently. And at the time, the Celtic Tiger was roaring up to the top of its great journey, and we also, you know, there was a great push on to go, hey, why can't we see films of us doing really prosperous and fabulous? And at the time, I was on social welfare, so I didn't feel very prosperous or fabulous, and so I just wanted to make a film that showed a kind of that there is an underbelly underneath it all, and so it was kind of a truthful thing. So it kind of changed. I think especially young people latched onto the film and went, yeah, actually we want to make films like that. And there's been a whole new generation of filmmakers have come out. I'm not as if I'm saying that it's all my fault. Look what I've done, it's fabulous. But it was, you know, these movements happen because it's collectively in the air. We just happen to kind of get in there very early with it, I think.
Okay, so does anyone in the audience have any questions?
Did you always know you was going to play the character that you played, or were you going to cast someone?
We actually, we were talking about that. I wasn't supposed to be in it at all, and I wrote the part for Tom that Tom plays alongside me. I wrote that especially for him because he was a special boy and I loved him dearly. And the other part was for another friend of mine who I don't love so dearly anymore. And he bowed out with 7 days to go to filming because he just wanted to take it easy, man, as he said himself. It's terrible when your best friend does that. And so at the time, all the other actors in Ireland were fat. And so I was the thinnest actor in Dublin at the time, and I knew the lines, so it was kind of, oh Jesus. So I really didn't want to do it because I thought I was going to be found out on a grand scale, like there'd be no one to blame but me, you know. And I was also nervous because I was so close to it, and the idea of being the writer and being on set, and I was afraid that the director would feel that I was a second voice on set. You don't need a second voice on set, you need to talk to your director. And I did once or twice go over to people and went, do you know if you say this line like this, You're fine if you say the whole line as I wrote it. There was a bit of that goes on, but I wasn't supposed to do it, but it was a delight that I did it, and I'm incredibly proud of it. I remember when there was a little cinema in Dublin alongside one of the production houses, and Len didn't want me. I saw some of the early cuts of scenes and stuff like that, but then I stayed away until it was ready, and he said, "Come in and see it," and I went in to see it with Tom, and I sat in the cinema, and I remember, because I was never involved in the film industry before, so suddenly I was in a film and I was like, oh my god. And I remember it finished and I was incredibly moved by it, and I had stopped just staring at myself, which is a very difficult thing to do as an actor. And I remember leaning over to Tom and saying, nobody can take that away from me, or away from us. Like, that was a piece of work that we had done and that we were incredibly proud of. Regardless of whether 50 people went to see it or a bazillion people went to see it, it was still a piece of work that I know that I'm very proud of. So it was a delight to be involved in that kind of way.
I was wondering if you intended the film to have a slightly like Waiting for Godot type sort of feeling about it. That sort of occurred to me in the.
Well, there is. I mean, Waiting for What You Call Him is my joke on Waiting for Godot, but there definitely is. I mean, I come from a theatre background in Ireland, and you can't do anything anymore without referencing Godot on stage. Like, it's ground zero, and there's you can't do anything in Dublin either without referencing James Joyce. So a day in Dublin walking around, so there's a bit of Joyce, a bit of Laurel and Hardy, a bit of but I think mostly it's because it's the vaudevillian element, and Godot came from that. Like, he made a film, he wrote a film for what's his name? He's not Laurel and Hardy, he's the other fellow. Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton was in a short that he did, and he was fascinated with all sorts of vaudeville. So I think that it came from that. But yeah, there definitely are, and it was deliberately Waiting for What You Call Him. It was definitely there, except he turns up in my film.
Any other questions?
I was going to ask you to say a little about the conflict between writing and acting, but you've already covered that a little bit. The other thing is the relationship between the two of you. Did you work together before? And if you only had a week, how did you kind of...
Well, Tom and I were best friends for a long time. So my first job when I left drama school, I was his understudy, and I tried to fling him down several flights of stairs in my jealous stage, and we were very, very close. We lived together for a while. I was mad about him. He subsequently died about 3 years ago. Tom did, unfortunately. But he was a world-class actor. In fact, a lot of response that we got when it came out was people asking, are the two boys actual heroin addicts, which I thought was hilarious. I was like, I'm a trained actor, I already know. How very dare you. But Tom especially, because he just looks absolutely and utterly destroyed. He won a Tony Award on Broadway. He was incredibly well known, but he was egoless in lots of ways. Like, sometimes I hate method actors because they're willing to destroy a film for the sake of their own performance. Like, their performances are so egocentric, and the whole Daniel Day-Lewis, like, chewing up the scenery. I mean, it's great and all that, and he's very good, of course, but he's willing to wreck a film. And for me, as somebody who's involved in theatre and involved in film, the totality of the piece, a play is more important than a performance in a play. And I think if you're not serving the whole, then you're serving your own self. And Tom was just not like that, and he was completely egoless. Like, it's not drawing attention to itself for the sake of himself. He was just a gorgeous actor.
Questions? So I suppose I'll finish up with so what have you got planned for the future? What other projects are you working on?
It's kind of getting harder and harder to get films made. I did a film after this called Garage. I did a television series called Prosperity. I've then gone back to writing for the theatre a bit. I had a play that was on last year in Dublin called Trade, which did very well for me, and that's going to go on in Edinburgh, I think. I have a film that I acted in coming out, which I made in America, which is very strange because it's an American production, and it was called A Kiss for Jed Wood. They'd never heard of Jed Wood, and I came over going, do you know there's these guys in Ireland at the moment who are really kind of making it, and they go, they'll be gone by the time we're releasing it. And of course they're not gone away, so it's not Golden Kiss for Jed. So that's coming out this month, and I'm going away to America touring a play, acting. I go back to the theatre and act sometimes. And I have a film, I've two films that are financing at the moment, but I kind of, one of them is a musical about Cuban transvestite prostitutes, which is just commercial gold, as you can tell. So trying to get people to invest in that, it can be quite difficult, and my mother's in despair. Why? Write something funny. And beyond that, I'm developing some ideas in Ireland. I mean, Ireland is in a strange position at the moment. Its funds are dried up. European funds have dried up, and there's this push, like David Cameron said it a while ago, we only want to invest in successful movies. Whatever the hell that is. So there's this idea out there that we are truculently trying not to get people into the cinema to watch movies, but it's just so it's kind of been said that maybe my types of movies aren't what they want to be making now. They want to be making more commercially orientated. So we just got to trick them into thinking that it's commercial and then making it. But we'll see. Maybe the end of this year I'll certainly have something in production, I think.
Anybody, have you read anybody who's seen the film who's reacted against the humour in it? I think the humour in it is what makes them human.
Yes.
But have you ever had anybody who said you shouldn't,
Well, yes. I mean, there was an initial response from the media in Ireland when we brought it out, which was like, you're writing a comedy, or you're doing a comedy about homeless heroin addicts, and we're kind of going, the people who laugh the loudest are anybody who's either been a heroin addict or is a heroin addict. They kind of think it's hilarious. I mean, it's a serious point. You do have to. There is a moral question about whether you're laughing with or at, and I think we do both in this film. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that in lots of ways. It's not exploitative, and it's not intended to be exploitative. And in fact, the whole film is about namelessness and putting names to people and giving personalities to people who are generally given a generic name like the Junkies, or but it could just as easily be the Gypsies or the Muslims or the Geordies or the Scots or whatever, or the Man United supporters, or and if you give a generic name to a group of people, it means you can hate them more easily than that. So this was kind of, but I mean, within the film we don't push the comedy to a certain level, but we do, and we make the audience choose whether they want to laugh or not. There's been some screenings I've been at where people have rolled in the aisles laughing, and I've been like, and there's some screenings where there's total silence and people just get very upset afterwards. But there you go. Sure, we're all of us ridiculous at the end of the day, I think.
And there's just a question at the back.
I want to ask you a question about the writing process that you've already touched on by saying it's better to research afterwards rather than bog down in research. What is your discipline in writing? Do you sort of get up every morning at 10 o'clock and sit down and say, I've got to write like computer screen or
I get up at about 6 o'clock in the morning, do 4 hours of yoga, and then from one project to the next it changes. I mean, I know from other writers we tend to digest each other's processes, going, what do you do? Do you get up at what? You write in the morning. But I generally tend to write at night. I wander around the town in and out of bookshops and tell myself I'm a horrible person because I'm not at home at my computer writing, and then I get home and I force myself to sit down and then I write. I don't think you can write for more than 3 hours a day in lots of ways. Your concentration can't hold it up. So it'd be about 3 hours a day, and then maybe fiddle about or make notes on what you should be reading and what you should be watching just in case and that sort of thing. But you certainly have to lock yourself away. It's quite a lonely process. I find writing quite lonely. It's why whenever I get cast in a play, for instance, I just arrive at the first day of rehearsals going, other people in the room, I can't believe it, I'm talking to human beings. So there's a lot of self-hatred and loneliness goes with writing, I find. It's lovely.
And to carry on from that question, how long did it take you from your initial idea when you met with
The producer,
chap you met, to actually having a script that was workable, as opposed to being various drafts?
This screenplay, because I didn't know anything, only I knew that it was a journey through a day. It tended to take a longer time than a normal play that would a screenplay that would have a straight up story. So I've got 18 drafts of that on my computer.
Yeah.
But the whole process took about a year, from the time we met to the time we started shooting, basically. Which is pretty fast, but when it was done on absolute shoestring, like absolute tiny budget, and so you can work that fast when you've got, when you don't have to worry about pleasing lots of people who are giving you money. Yeah, so.
Can I just ask, because I don't know anything about the culture at all, you, in terms of your research, you had these two guys going into the coal bunker.
Yes.
And there'd been a sort of build-up saying you won't be welcome when you go there.
Yeah.
And in fact, no one was fazed by their presence at all.
Yes.
Had you done any sorts of research from the folks that you'd interacted with as to how folks who've not been hooked on heroin respond to family and friends and so on entering into their public space?
Well, it's one of those things. It's like, in a community where alcohol is very prevalent, and there's a lot of that in Ireland, where somebody can be an incredible alcoholic, but they're functional. It's when they stop functioning that anger breaks out. It's like, you've got to get you out of the house or get you away. We can't be supporting you anymore. But it's not a hatred of alcohol. It's a hatred of your failure within it. So with those boys, they had gotten to the point where they were robbing off their families, and they dragged this other boy down with them. It's the fact that they refused to find a bottom, basically. That because, we hung around with lots of, went to a lot of community centres and stuff around Dublin, and you'd meet people who were going like, I'm on a methadone stabilisation programme, I live at home, this is my wife, these are my kids. There's quite a normalisation in that, it's not like, oh my God, they're doing heroin. It's, oh my God, you fucked up your friend and you left him wherever he died and walked away. That's what's, oh my God, you turned your back on your community. In fact, it was rather pretentiously, but when I was writing it above my workstation, I just had a piece of paper which said belong written on it. And I think that that's what they chose not to do. They chose not to belong in their society, basically, in their group. They turned their backs on it.
Any more questions? Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Everyone like to join me in a round of applause again for my